Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this Glow Meet that we're running here in the beautiful surroundings of Giffnock Synagogue in the south side of Glasgow. My name's Joe Walker. I'm Senior Education Officer at Education Scotland, and I've got responsibility for all things religious and moral education. This is our first Glow Meet for this year, and this one is called Learn About Jewish People and Judaism, and the whole purpose of today is to help all of you out there to ask questions, to find out about Jewish life, really to ask anything you want today. We're prepared for questions on absolutely anything you want to find out about. I'm really grateful that I'm joined today by two people. This is Margalit Borowski. Margalit was a primary teacher in primary school, very close to here, a Jewish ethos primary school, in fact. And we've also got Zoe Jacobs, who's a development officer for the Scottish Council of Jewish Communities. And Zoe, her job here is to help people to learn about Judaism, and she's putting together a really interesting program at the moment where she's trying to train up visitors to go out into schools and to talk to people there about Jewish life and belief. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pass over to Zoe and Margalit very shortly, and they're just going to give us a brief presentation about Jewish life and Judaism in Scotland. And then once we've done that, we're going to throw it open to you, and our trusty director is over on the other side of the camera. You can't see her, but we can. And so she'll throw the questions at us that you're going to be typing up on the screen. We can't see the screen, so we're just relying on our director to pass that information on. But please take the opportunity to ask the questions you've always wanted to ask. Just a wee reminder for the practitioners out there that we're also doing a separate event from 3:45 till 4:30 today, and that's particularly for practitioners. So that's the kind of questions that teachers might ask when the children have left school for the day. But hopefully you've got loads of questions for us today, and you'll go away today knowing much more about Judaism and Jewish life and how that fits into Scottish life more generally. So I'm going to pass over to Zoe, who's going to tell you a little bit about, well, what's it like to be Jewish in Scotland and what does that mean. So hopefully you'll learn a great deal from Zoe. So if I pass on to you, Zoe.
Super. Hello. So Judaism is one of the world's monotheistic religions. A monotheistic religion means that we believe in one God, and we believe that God created the world a really, really long time ago. And Jewish people come about because if your mum is Jewish, we believe that you are Jewish too. And so Jewish people have existed for hundreds and hundreds of years because having a Jewish family and a Jewish mother means that you are Jewish, and you can also convert into Judaism. And the Jewish history, the Jewish story, includes lots of different things, probably some that you've heard about. And these stories are written down in a Torah, which is like a Jewish Bible. It's the Jewish book of all our stories, and these include some things like the story of the Exodus, which is being in Egypt and Pharaoh and running across to the Red Sea and the Red Sea parting, stories about Joseph, who has a Technicolor Dreamcoat, and stories about building the temple once they had eventually got to Israel after leaving Egypt. They then built the temple. But one of the things that Judaism shares with all those stories long ago is that people still believe in similar things to the ones they did then. And one of those things is, as I said, that we believe in one God. We also follow the 10 Commandments, which a lot of other religions will follow as well. Most of these rules are about how to live our life, but the first two are about God and about making sure that we believe there is only one God. But Judaism tends to be a religion about doing things. So it's sort of making sure that we believe some things, but the really big thing is about how we live our lives. And lots of people talk about living a Jewish life rather than believing a Jewish thought. And that's why some people talk about a Jewish culture and the idea that there are jokes that Jewish people will understand or food that Jewish people will eat. And even though there are Jews across the whole world, there are Chinese Jews, Japanese Jews, Australian Jews, British Jews, we all share a little bit of the same culture. And that means that if you met a Jewish person, wherever you were in the world, although their culture will be a little bit different, because, say, Australian culture would sort of mush in with Jewish culture, which would mean that their Judaism would be a little bit different to a Japanese Jew, where their culture would mush in with Judaism and change it. There are some things that would stay pretty much the same. And one of those things is Shabbat. I don't know if any of you have heard of the word Shabbat. It sounds a bit similar to the word Sabbath. And the Christian Sabbath was on a Sunday. That's their day of rest. Our Sabbath, our Shabbat, is on a Saturday. Except it's not quite that simple, because Jewish days don't work in the same way as days normally. In that, normally, most people would say that a day starts in the morning, when you get up. In Jewish days, we start at a funny time. And this is because back in the Torah, that book I was talking about, it tells us about how the world was created. And it said, that God created the sun and the moon, or animals and birds. And after each day, it says it was evening and morning the first day, or evening and morning the second day. Now, if you've noticed, that's a bit of a funny thing to say. Most people would say morning and then evening. But no, it says evening and then morning. So our days start in the evening, which means our Shabbat, since I said it was a Saturday, it actually starts on Friday night. Because on Saturday night, Sunday starts, which makes loads of sense. So our Shabbat starts on a Friday night and will end on a Saturday night. So it's still 24 hours. It's just a slightly funny, overlappy time. And that's our Shabbat. But what we do is that we celebrate it in really specific ways. And we tend to use the word observe it. We observe Shabbat. And that means we prepare for it, and then we observe it for those 24 hours. And different Jews will observe it in different ways and prepare for it in different ways. One of the most important things is it's a day for family. So most people will make sure that they're home early from work or come straight home from school, and everyone as a family will get ready together, which meant when I came home from school, I'd want to turn the telly on and Mum would tell me off and go and tell me to tidy my room. And I'd tidy my room, and she would tidy her room, and Dad would do the hoovering, and Mum would do the cooking, and we'd all get ready together on the idea that Shabbat was a really special day, so we were all making sure we worked towards it. Because most people know that if you sort of feel a bit meh about something, it'll probably be a bit meh. But if everyone works really hard towards it, you'll get much more out of it. I'm sure some teachers tell you that a lot of the time. If you work towards it and you work really hard, then you'll get more out of it. And we sort of believe that Shabbat's the same thing. We believe that if you prepare lots for it, then you get much more out of it. And that's that day, it's a day of rest. So all that work towards it, all that tidying and cooking and cleaning, means that when Shabbat starts and we all take a really deep breath in and we relax for a whole 24 hours, it's much more meaningful. Some of the laws of Shabbat, the rules, the way that we celebrate it, come from juxtaposition, which for anyone who's doing any books, sometimes your teachers will talk about that, which is a very long word. And basically it means when two different things are put right next to each other. And in the Torah, there are lots of stories about how they built the temple. And they used verbs, doing words. So they hammered things, or they smashed things, or they tied things together. And they had a big long list of how they made the temple, lots and lots of verbs. And at the end it said, and they rested on the seventh day. So, like Jews rest now on their Shabbat, hundreds of years ago they still had that Shabbat. And so lots of Jewish scholars decided that what Shabbat must mean was that those verbs were things that we did throughout the rest of the week. But on Shabbat, we didn't do any of those things, and we rested. And that means that some Jews today will observe Shabbat by keeping those same rules, so making sure that they do all those doing words, so they carry, or they strike a match, or they'll hit things, or they'll tie things for the rest of the week. But on Shabbat, so from Friday night to Saturday night, they won't do any of those. And that means that they won't drive on Shabbat, because driving means when you turn the key in the ignition, it sparks up a flame to start the electricity, or the gas to start the car. And that's a bit similar to striking a match. And so they won't do that. That means you have to prepare lots of things before Shabbat starts. You need to do all your cooking before Shabbat begins and keep it warm throughout the rest of Shabbat. And that means that Shabbat's really different from the rest of the week. And that's a really nice thing. And some Jews won't do that. they'll observe Shabbat in a different way, but the thing that's the same throughout it is that they'll try and make sure it's different from the rest of the week. And they'll try and make sure that they see their family, they'll play board games, they'll go out and have a walk, and they'll make sure that they actually see everyone or see all their friends. And we bring in Shabbat on Friday night to sort of mark the fact that it's a really different day. We celebrate it by lighting 2 candles, a bit like these candlesticks here. We'd light these 2 candlesticks and we'd say a blessing over them. And then we'd have a glass of wine, and it's special wine, and you can see this, it's in a special cup, and we'd say a blessing again. And this blessing is in Hebrew, and you can see these Hebrew letters. I don't know quite how well you can see them, but you can see the Hebrew letters on here, which you can see are very different from the English letters, and we read them from right to left, not left to right. So we'd read them the other way to how you'd read English. So we'd say a blessing over this glass of wine as well. And then we'd have, and I'm afraid you're going to have to use your imagination here, a really yummy big loaf of bread, and actually we'd have 2 loaves of bread, and we'd have them, imagine my 2 loaves of bread, and they're plaited. So like you'd have a pleat or braid in your hair, we plait our bread, which makes it look really special and beautiful. And so we'd say a blessing over the bread as well, and then we'd all have a bit of bread, and then we'd normally have a really nice dinner. And one of my favourite things about going home, even now, is that I'll try and make sure I'll organise it so I go home on a Friday. So I get Shabbat with my family, and Mum will make sure that she's cooked whatever I like most, because she's a really good mum. And we'll all have Shabbat together and sit down and have a really nice dinner. So that's one of my favourite things. And we mark the start of Shabbat on Friday night with these things, and the end of Shabbat on Saturday night. There's a ceremony, very similar. It's called Havdalah, and we also have a candle, and we also have wine, and we smell really nice scents like cinnamon, and the idea that it smells really sweet. We breathe in that sweetness, which is sort of the essence of Shabbat, that really nice, happy time, and then we sort of breathe it in at the end of Shabbat, and hopefully that sweetness will continue the rest of the week until Shabbat starts again the following week. The other thing you tend to do on Shabbat on a Saturday morning, most people, or on a Friday night, is that you go to synagogue, which is a place that we're at here. And this is the place where Jewish people will go to pray. And there are services, in some synagogues there are services every single day, but most Jews, even if they don't go to those services, some Jews will often go on Shabbat, either on Friday night or on Saturday morning. And those are some of the things that you'd notice most about a Jewish person living anywhere near you across Scotland, is that they might celebrate Shabbat, they might go to synagogue, and they might wear specific things as well. And some of those things you might see people wearing around, and sometimes they'd only wear them in synagogue. And one of the things they might wear is called a kippah. And Jewish men will wear them, and some Jewish women wear them. And you can see if I turn around, I'm wearing one there. Unhelpfully, it's a bit quite similar to the colour of my hair. I didn't plan that very well. I have lots of other ones, I should have worn those. But some Jewish women will wear them, and lots of Jewish men wear them, and they'll always wear one in a synagogue. And that's a mark that God is above us, and we're respecting him by wearing a kippah. And Jewish men and some Jewish women will also wear a talit, which is like a prayer shawl. I don't have one available, which is silly. But it's big and white, and it will have tassels in all the 4 corners. And that's a slightly strange rule. Lots of the things in Judaism make very clear sense, and you can see a reason why. But one of these rules is a rule that we were just told. And we were told wear a tassel at the corner at each corner of a garment. Most of our clothes don't have corners. It's very odd to have clothes that have corners. If you look at what I'm wearing now, minus my scarf, there are no corners on clothes. So we try to make clothes that have corners. And if you know your maths, you know that the shapes that have corners are not circles, but they are squares or rectangles. So we have clothes, a bit like a scarf, a scarf with a big rectangle shape. That means we have 4 corners, and on each of the corners they'll have tassels. And the idea is that when you're in synagogue, Jewish men will wear a big scarf like that called a talit, and at each of the corners there'll be a tassel. And when you look at the tassel, which means if you're shuggling around, you'll notice the tassels going. And that means that you remember that God told you to do that, which means you remember that God exists. And some Jewish men will wear that all of the time. They'll wear like a little vest underneath their clothes, and sometimes you can just see the tassels are coming out of underneath their clothes. And that means that whenever they move, whenever they're walking, they'll notice those tassels. There are lots of people who are Jewish who live in Scotland today, and they might be wearing some of those things. You might see them wearing a kippah or a talit or some of these tassels. And we reckon there are somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 Jews living in Scotland. Most of those people will live in Glasgow or in Edinburgh, but there are lots of Jews across the whole of the rest of Scotland, sometimes in Aberdeen or Dundee. there are some Jews in St Andrews, and there are actually quite a lot of Jews in other places, but there are much smaller communities. Generally, Jews tend to live in all together because it means we can create a sense of community, and that's some of the things that are most important to Jewish people, in that we build what I said that was this Jewish life, and that's really important to have lots of other Jewish people around you, and also when you're not driving on Shabbat, you need to be able to get to the synagogue, and that means that unless you live quite close, it becomes quite an effort. So lots of people will try and live close to their synagogue, and that's why Jewish people tend to stay in the areas where there are synagogues, just because it's really practical. It means they don't have to walk really far, which would be really sad and really tiring. Means you get to synagogue feeling exhausted rather than feeling ready to see everyone and pray to God. So I think we're going to move on to some questions if you have any. I've been talking for a really long time, so hopefully you have questions about what I've said or questions about other things that you've been talking about.
Yes, we've got quite a lot of questions to come in already. Yes. Now the first one is from Mr. Ramsey's class, and he's asking, and I think it's actually referring to what you were talking about. Is it called a creep mat?
A kippah.
You keep me right, and is that what you wear on your head?
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Just tell us a bit more. I know you give us a little bit.
Oh, I can take it off, and then I can show you a bit more. Hang on. You can see I've kept it on with clips because my head is not shaped for a kippah, and it is just a kippah shaped like that. It is just a very small hat, and actually what you notice is that lots of Muslim people will wear a hat that's similar to this, and that's because different religions often have similar rules, and it's developed in different ways, but lots of Muslim men will wear something like this as well. But Jewish men will wear them, and some Jewish ladies will wear them, and we wear them in synagogue and out of synagogue, but in synagogue you really have to wear one. All Jewish men are asked to wear one in synagogue, but out and about, you may see people wearing them as well.
Fantastic.
Can I just interrupt for 2 seconds there as well? When I met Zoe previously, she told me a story about a kippah and Harry Potter.
Yes, I don't have it with me, which is silly, but what happened was that I had a kippah, and it had two letters on it. It had an H and a P. And the P was a really specific P. It had a P, and then it was a big lightning scar. And someone came up to me and went, "Is there something Jewish about puh? And I went, "No. There's just something special about puh, because it happens to stand for Harry Potter. And that's my favourite book. So I have a kippah that has Harry Potter on it. My dad has a kippah that says Manchester City, because that's his favourite football team. And my mum has a kippah that has two knitting needles on it and a little ball of wool, because her favourite thing to do is knit."
That's a wonderful story.
We love it.
We've got a couple of questions from Hollybrook Academy and Mr. Kavanagh's class, and Joanna, she wants to ask, what does, now is it challah or challah? Challah bread taste like when you put the salt on it?
Good question. The way to test it out, if you actually want to know, is it tastes a bit like brioche or like croissant. So challah is made with lots of egg, and therefore it's quite light and flaky and yummy and sweet. We make it really specifically very sweet. But then you put a little bit of salt in it. I don't know if you know why we put a bit of salt in it. It's one of my favourite stories about Judaism, is that we believe that everyone should be happy and everyone should have a really good chance to rest, because it makes lots of scientific evidence has told you that if you work really hard, it's great, but actually what you should do is work really hard and then have a rest. And so we believe that Shabbat is really important for that reason, and we hope that we put a little bit of salt in our bread because we're saying it's such a nice sweet day, but we put a little bit of salt that's a bit bitter to remember that not everyone is having that nice sweet day. Some people across the world cannot have a day off because they can't afford to, because they need to work all the time, because they need to pay bills or pay their rent. And some people aren't allowed a day off because nasty people tell them they can't. But we hope, so every Shabbat we have a little bit of salt to remind ourselves that some people aren't happy, but we hope there's one day where no one will have to put salt on their bread because we aren't remembering anyone that's unhappy, because we hope that one day there'll be a Shabbat where everyone is at peace and everyone gets a chance. But back to the question. Imagine what if you put salt on a croissant. It would taste a bit funny, but it doesn't taste bad. And sometimes salt brings the flavours out more. Some people will put salt on food when they're cooking. So it sort of makes the challah taste nice. But I tend to only put a little bit on, and then for the rest of Shabbat, if I'm having challah, I'll just have it normally, and I'll tend to have it with butter and honey.
And hopefully that answers Miss McGarry's question, who's also asking, do you always have to put salt on it? But I think
Can I come in with another answer? Also, in the days of the temple, when sacrifices were brought, when offerings were brought, it had to be salted. There had to be salt at that time. So it's a reminder of the olden days as well. That's when offerings were brought with the salt.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And we've got lots more questions as well coming in. And a question from Miss Tate's class, and they're asking, why are baby boys circumcised?
Do you want to answer that one?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Baby boys are circumcised when they are 8 days old, if in good health. And it is a sign, a bodily sign between the Jewish people and God, that God asked for what's called the covenant. It's like like a promise that God gave to Abraham, one of the founding fathers of the Jewish religion, that this promise of a Jewish life in the land that he was going to choose for these people to live in would go on forever. And so this circumcision ritual has been going on ever since the days of Abraham, which is about 4,000 years already. And it's something that will never change in the Jewish religion.
It's also nice. Sometimes, you know, when there's a tradition in your family and you sort of want to do it because your mum's done it or your dad's done it and then your grandparents have done it and your great-grandparents have done it, and you kind of like it just because it's part of your tradition. So even if that's having a middle name that's always in your family, or that on your birthday you always do something, once it's a tradition, it's nice to keep that tradition and just remember that while you're celebrating it, people hundreds of years ago were celebrating exactly the same thing.
Excellent. And this doesn't apply to baby girls. Does anything happen at birth for them?
No, for baby girls, a naming service after the first week of their life. They'll be named in the synagogue, and in some synagogues the baby is brought to the front of the synagogue and their name is given with a blessing. Or sometimes, at a certain time of the year, all the baby girls born that year will be given a special blessing, and their names will be called out at the time.
Fantastic, thank you. And we've got a very interesting question here from Miss Tate's class. She's asking, what do you believe about the afterlife in the Jewish faith?
There's sort of a problem with afterlife in Judaism in that no one really knows. And so that's sort of what Jewish people believe, is that no one really knows. And certainly for me, I believe that if I keep thinking about it and worrying about it, then I sort of stop thinking about what I'm doing right now. And my belief is that what I need to do is have a really good life now and try and be the nicest person I can and make sure that my friends are happy and my parents are happy and that I'm happy, and spend all my time working on that and not trying to worry about what's going to happen, because even if I was magically working out and worked out exactly what would happen, it wouldn't change anything. It would still happen. And if I got it horrendously wrong, it would still happen. So I try and believe that I don't really know. I think there is an afterlife, but I don't really know, and I'm sort of okay with not knowing.
Excellent, a super answer, thank you. And the question is, Mr. Kavanagh has got a Manchester City supporter.
Hooray!
In his audience today, which is fantastic. And Mr. Ramsey's asking, do Jewish people like football? I presume they do, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Just like everybody else, there are lots and lots of football supporters.
And the football team as well, the Maccabi team.
Yeah.
Locally I have. Yes.
So that's lots of young Jewish boys who play as a group together. But yes, there's lots of football supporters.
Fantastic, thank you. And we've also got a question which is asking, when you pray, do you pray in a particular direction?
Yes. The direction is the direction of Jerusalem to the east. And that is, unfortunately, it's not always to the east. If you're in a different country, then you would face towards whichever is the direction of Jerusalem, where the temple once stood, and that is the tradition. So, for example, our synagogue is facing east. Each synagogue will face in the direction towards Jerusalem in this country, will face east.
Fantastic, thank you. And Shannon would like to ask, why is the Torah written in Hebrew?
Because that was the language that was spoken, probably sort of in those days, and it's now a language that we use in Britain. We use almost specifically only for when we're reading the Torah. But actually, people in Israel, who are Jewish people and some other people as well, will speak Hebrew all the time and also use it when they're reading the Torah.
It's called Lashon Kodesh. It's a holy language, and that's the reason why it's been preserved.
Thank you. And now I'm thinking about things that you eat, but I think I know the answer to this one. So can you eat vegan meat? But I don't think you can eat meat anyway.
That's an interesting question.
Well,
So, Jewish people have lots of rules about what they eat, but thankfully they're relatively simple. So I'll give you a quick overview. Let's talk about animals first, like the animals that you see walking on the ground. There are two main rules. One, they have to have a cloven hoof, which is a funny word. Hooves are the things that they walk on, like a horse's hoof is sort of this shape. We all think of a horse's hoof. But a cloven hoof, cloven means sort of cut. So rather than having it all in one go, they've cut it in the middle. And that means it's a shape like this. And that's sort of like how a cow's hoof looks. And actually a bit like a pig's hoof. But rule number 2 is it has to chew the cud. Chewing the cud is that funny thing where an animal will eat or sort of munch its food and sort of swallow it, and then will bring it back up again, to eat it a bit more. And that means that they know that they've digested it really well. And it sort of means they have lots of tummies. Pigs don't have that, so even though they have a cloven hoof, they don't chew the cud, so we can't have them. And only animals that have both those things can we eat. So that's like cows, which makes beef, and sheep, which makes lamb. And so those are the animals we are allowed to eat. If we look at fish, they have to have fins, which is like the little thing that Nemo has a broken one of. So fins and scales, which are the shiny bits of a fish, and it has to have both of those. So we couldn't have eels or crabs, stuff like that, but we can have tuna and salmon and cod. And with birds, it can't be a bird of prey. So we couldn't eat eagle, but I don't think I'd want to eat an eagle anyway. But we can have chickens, turkey, and goose, and duck. We can play that game for a while. So those are the things that we have, and those are sort of, I work those out as the what rule. Those are what we can eat. How we can eat them, it means that they have to be, particularly with animals, they have to be killed in a special way. And this is killed by someone who's specially trained, and that's sort of how, and there's lots of rules, which we don't really need to go into, but it's killed in a really special way, and that's called, if it's killed in a kosher way. So we've done the what, and we've done the how. The when, Jewish people are told we can't have it, the original thing is you can't see the kid in its mother's milk, which actually means you can't have meat and milk together, or that's how the rabbis have interpreted it, which means we couldn't have cheese on spaghetti bolognese, because spaghetti bolognese is made out of meat and cheese is made out of milk, so you can't have that, even though I think it must taste really nice. I'm a bit sad about that one. And I can't have lasagna, but I could have vegetable lasagna, which is quite nice, so I'm okay. So that's a when, and a what, and a how.
Excellent. That's brilliant. Thank you. And Miss Tate's class is asking, if you could try food from any other culture apart from your own, what would you like to try?
Ooh,
Great
I
question.
think
That's really interesting because, in fact, because of the way the food is cooked, other cultures' recipes can be used, because I particularly like Italian food or Middle Eastern food, and I adapt my recipes so that I can use kosher ingredients, but with a twist to whichever culture I might be enjoying. So
yeah, I've had kosher spring rolls, and they were really yummy.
yeah, and there are kosher Indian restaurants in London. I really like Indian food, so we can have that too.
We should point out at this point as well that there was a recent event run with the Jewish community in Scotland, and the starring part of that was a kosher haggis.
Yes,
I don't know what was in it, but
I make
obviously
a vegetarian haggis,
Yeah.
or I can make a kosher haggis with ingredients with meat as well, so I can do both.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I've got lots of questions still coming in here. Another question from Miss Tate's class is what's your favourite festival? You mentioned lots of different ones. Do you have a favourite one?
It's so difficult. We're in the middle of a festival right at this moment, of the festival of Sukkot. Just had Jewish New Year, we've had Yom Kippur, and now it's Sukkot. And it's a bit of a harvest festival. It's a beautiful festival this year because the weather is so glorious at the moment. And traditionally people will move out of the comfort of their own home to a little temporary dwelling, and we have one in our garden. We have a little put-up, like a little hut, and it's not completely waterproof because the roof has to be exposed to the stars at night. And with the weather being so beautiful just now, it's a lovely, lovely time. We decorate the sukkah, we have friends in, we invite them for meals, and I think that must be one of my favourite times in Scotland. I like all the festivals. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to be really boring and agree with her. I think lots of the festivals that I like, lots of the festivals have quite strict rules, and you've always got to do this and you've always got to do that. And I quite like the fact that my parents were silly people and went, okay, we're going to follow all those rules that we have to do, but we're also going to sort of add some fun ones. Not that the rules aren't fun, but at Sukkot, we'd sleep in our sukkah. So we'd build this temporary dwelling out of wood, and my dad would get a hammer out and I'd get some nails, and we wouldn't have a clue what we were doing really, but we'd just about build something. And then because I grew up in the south of England where it's a bit warmer than in Scotland, we slept in it every night for a whole 7 days. And when I was really little, I'd go to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening, and Mum would pretend to go to sleep with me, but she didn't really want to go to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening. But as a special treat, at about 8 o'clock at night, she'd wake me up, tell me it was midnight. We'd have a midnight feast of a chocolate bar each, and then we'd go back to bed. And it was my favourite thing of being really special time with me, just me and my mum, out in the beautiful garden, and we'd see all the twinkly stars, and we'd be all surrounded by leaves, and you could smell in the middle of the night the fresh air and the leaves and all the greenness. And it would really remind me quite how lovely it is to be outside, but also imagine having to do that every single day. And the fact that lots of people do have to do that, and trying to get that balance. But I really like it.
Excellent, thank you. And on the line about festivals, Mr. Kavanagh is asking on behalf of his S4 classes who are watching the class today, they've been learning about Rosh Hashanah, and what are the main similarities and differences between the Jewish New Year, which is celebrated recently, and the New Year as we celebrate in Scotland?
Okay, so Hagmanay at the end of December is a particularly pleasant time for my husband and I as well, because it's our wedding anniversary, but it's a different kind of celebration. New Year in Judaism is a time of reflection, and I know that at Hagmanay time people are thinking about the resolutions. In Judaism, people tend to think about the year that has passed and what they're going to do to make things better for the year ahead. And this year in particular, looking around the world, because it's a time, I believe, a time of judging for not just Jewish people, but the world as a whole. And I think that's one of the major differences. It's not a kind of party time with fireworks. It's a time of reflection, thinking of others, thinking about relationships between yourself and others, and relationship between yourself and God, and how things can be put into action for the year ahead. Jews believe that this is a time of judgment, and we need to we have to put things right. So if anybody's had a fallout, this is the time for making up and looking ahead to the new year. We talk about a sweet new year, talk about everything that should be positive for the year ahead, a healthy new year, and a time of people getting together and making that happen. So, do you have anything to add?
Don't think so.
Similarities and differences.
Certainly
food is involved, but
yeah, there's not sort of the things that you
apple
think
and honey
of, like the fireworks and
Yeah.
all the excitement and
like
sort of
that.
the counting down. We don't really. There's not so much counting down because there's less excitement about the fact that the new year is precisely starting, but actually more excitement about the mental aspect of that and how you view the old year versus the new year. It's still sort of exciting and happy and you get to eat food, but it's a lot more sort of internal rather than external celebration.
Fantastic, thank you. And Jamie wants to ask, how long do you pray for in the synagogue?
It depends on what time of the day the service is. There are three main services. In Orthodox Judaism, then that would be more for the men. to attend these services. And people can pray for as long or as short a time, generally, as they can, if they can't get to a synagogue. So it depends also on which particular Jewish way of life one follows. So I could pray at home anytime. I don't have to be set for particular times. And I think traditionally women would have a family to look after, so they weren't going to be rushing off to synagogue in the morning when they got little ones to get ready to go out to school or whatever. And so the responsibility is more on the men's side of the family. Okay.
Thank you. And Shannon would like to know, what do Jewish girls wear when they attend the synagogue?
Depends. There are some sort of rules about, again, like men wear a kippah because out of respect. Women will some women will wear a hat for the same reason. Some women will cover their shoulders and make sure that their dress is sort of below the knee. I tend to wear something that I think I look nice in and feel good in, so it feels like a really special thing that I'm going to. So I won't wear sort of my gardening jeans, but I'll wear something that I feel nice in and I feel is respectful. And then some Jewish women will also wear a kippah and a talit as well.
Excellent. Great, and thank you, Ms. Tate. Our S2s are just about to leave and our S1s are going to be coming in with even more questions.
Okay.
So in the interim, Joe, do you have some more questions that you would like to ask?
We have a number of questions. I mean, I hope everybody is getting a sense here. I certainly am. The real reason for doing these things was partly to help people who haven't got the ability to meet with actual Jewish people, because they might not have a Jewish community close to you. And I'm hoping that you're seeing that Jewish people are living a normal life in Scotland. It's not something completely different. Oh, Jewish people are in some kind of separate world. That Zoe and Margalit are telling us about things that we all do, foods that we enjoy, how we like dressing, what we like doing to celebrate things, and it might be slightly different in some ways, but it's just normal people doing normal things. So we hope you're getting all of that. Some of the questions here I think are absolutely fantastic. They're much better than the questions that I had. I'm going to pick up just a couple of things because you mentioned in answer, Margalit, to one of the questions earlier, you talked about Orthodox Jewish people. It might be good if we could just say a little bit more about the different groups within Judaism. Will you be able to do that a little bit?
I'll try.
Yeah.
My background is from an Orthodox point of view, where the tenets of the Torah, the Bible, are lived fully according to God's instructions. It could be said that there are different levels also within Orthodoxy. There are some people who might, in Orthodoxy, not be looking like I do. Different codes of dress, different areas where people live, spread out throughout Scotland, but also maybe within a smaller community, or spread out. There are different levels even within Orthodoxy, and then even in Scotland we have the Reform Synagogue. I think Zoe could probably talk more about the Reform way of life. There will be in Britain liberal Judaism as well, so there are different forms following the same basic tenets but with a different slant to how they approach that way of life.
So it's very important when you're in a school,
yes,
and you're using a book about Judaism, or you're watching something on TV, or you're using some kind of worksheet. It's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking all Jewish people do this, or all Jewish people believe that, and that we've already heard
I
that
can
that's
give
not
you
the case. There's different views about things.
One example at the moment, Zoe has her head covered. She's wearing her kippah. I have my head covered also, because I'm wearing a wig, because that is the style of Judaism that I'm following, that my head is covered at all times when I'm out in public, and I wear a wig or a hat or a scarf, but for purposes of the way I'm living at the moment, I'm wearing my wig.
And it's nice that we tend to, lots of things we'll
Yeah,
share,
yeah.
lots of things that I go, that's a really interesting way of interpreting that rule, or working out how you believe that rule should
And
be
we all
followed.
respect that. Yes.
And I do it a different way, and
That's it. And we're happy at
fine.
Zoe's
One
wearing
other
trousers
thing-
today. I don't possess a pair of trousers
Yeah.
for wearing in public, so that's
So
I
we've
think
got
it's all
that
to do
variety,
with
we've got
different
that
laws,
variation.
different rules, but we're happy with it. That's the way we live.
Well, one other thing I was going to ask, one question that I often was asked when I was a teacher by pupils, and you kind of referred to it a wee bit because you talked about the food laws, but of course obviously you're living in Scotland and you're living in a society which is not a Jewish society, so of course you might go out to other people's houses for dinner, or you might eat out or whatever. How do you work that in terms of, like, would you go to a fast food place and have fish and chips or something like that?
I think different Jews will work that out differently, and I find that the way I sort of mentally see it is that not even different denominations, so Orthodoxy or Reform or Liberal, but each person within that will have what they sort of follow and the sort of the boundaries that they go, this is definitely what I want and this is okay, but beyond that, I don't feel comfortable. And it's really personal. It's where you feel, and we tend not to try and judge other people and go, oh, your boundaries are different from mine, and isn't that fine? But you also make sure that you stick to yours. So for me, I don't eat non-kosher food, so I wouldn't eat pork, but I also am happy to eat chicken that isn't killed by a kosher butcher. I'll just eat any chicken as long as I know that it is chicken, not pork. And that means that I feel more comfortable going to other people's houses. Most of my friends know that I'm Jewish, and will sit me down and start going, right, what am I allowed to feed you? And we do exactly what I've just done with you, of the what and the when and the how and the why. And they are really interested by it. And I try and make sure that when I'm having that conversation, I ask them about if they have any religious beliefs and what it means, their food means to them. And we'll have a little RE session. And then I'll help them cook, or they'll cook for me. And I think that's really nice, but that's my way of doing it. So I'd make sure that they know the rules I'm happy with and the rules I'm not happy with. And I tend to try and, I believe that I should be doing this, but also if I make a mistake, there's not going to be some giant bolt of lightning and I'm going to be struck down dead. I do think it's what I'm trying to aim for. But if I make a mistake that's an honest mistake, I'll say sorry for it, but it's not a huge problem. But that's my way of thinking about it.
Okay. I entertain a lot. I'm afraid. I don't go out in the town very often, so we're much more involved in inviting people around to our home, entertaining at home. And again, within Orthodoxy, there are different levels of what we call kashrut, of the laws of keeping kosher, that we have lots of disposable dishes as well, so that I can be happy to invite somebody who might be more stringent in their observance of even to the level that we have at home, that I can have as many people from different backgrounds as possible. And that's the way we work. So, yeah, there are rules within rules.
And again, that's that variety, because there are some people who are very, very strict about absolutely everything. There are some people who are not quite so strict about things. So to make folks out there aware that there is that.
Most people are also really happy to be asked about it as well.
Yeah.
If you say you're Jewish and that's interesting, then we're really happy to talk about it and stuff. So feel free to ask. Most people won't be offended if you say, is this okay? And most people are really good at A, answering whether it's okay, and B, finding a solution. And everyone
ask a rabbi.
Yeah.
It's a hard one.
Have we got that first year class coming in there?
Yes, class 1F have just
1F.
arrived.
Hello 1F, welcome.
Ready to ask the questions, but maybe if you have another one just now while they're getting the question
The only thing I was going to ask was then, it was a similar kind of thing, you know, obviously when things like Christmas happen and Halloween and all of those kind of things, how do you respond to that?
I think I tended to respond via my parents, because for most of my life I was living with them. I think I have it slightly differently to some Jewish people in that my mum converted. So while my mum is Jewish, my mum's family is not, and so they would celebrate Christmas. So we'd ensure that we'd see that side of my family. It wasn't that it was Christmas, so we were going to cut them off and ignore them. So we would tend to go around not on Christmas dinner, we'd let them have Christmas while we'd celebrate Hanukkah, but sometime around that time of year, we'd make sure we'd go and see each other, and we'd give them Christmas presents and they'd give us Hanukkah presents. But we didn't celebrate Christmas, I didn't have a Christmas tree, I didn't really mind. We'd put up decorations for Hanukkah anyway, so our house looked pretty. I still felt festive, but I felt like it was a different kind of festive. Didn't do Halloween, didn't do any of that stuff, but I'm still proud that my parents made Judaism fun enough and interesting enough and engaging enough at whatever level, at whatever age I was, that it was fun and interesting and there was purpose to it, that I didn't really mind. It wasn't that I felt like I was missing out, I was doing something different and equally fun. And my favourite thing was when people said, don't you miss Christmas? I went, no, Hanukkah is 8 days long. Why would I want Christmas?
It's every day.
Well, 1F have been very busy getting the questions in here, and they do apologise that we know some of them have been answered, but they're just coming fresh here, and they're asking what the hat that was spotted on your head means. So a very quick recap.
Okay, I'll take it off while I natter, because you can see there's little bits of it you can see from the front, but it is quite a small hat, and it's called a kippah, and Jewish men will wear one, and some Jewish ladies wear them, and they wear them in synagogue, and some people wear them throughout the rest of the day as well, and it's a sign to show that God is above us and that we respect him.
Thank you.
And earlier on, we were talking about the tallit, and we do have one now, so I'm just going to nip off and get that. And I wasn't going to answer my phone. That was our director's phone. So I'll get Zoe to say a little bit about this tallit.
So as you can see, remember, for those who were there, I was talking about what shapes have corners. And this tallit, as you can see, is rectangular shaped and therefore has 4 corners. And each of the corner there is a tassel. And I don't know how well you can see this, but this is the idea is that Jewish men and some Jewish ladies will wear them in synagogue when they pray. And we're told that each of the corners of our garments has to have a tassel, which means when you struggle around or when you're moving, you see the tassel shaking around, and it means that you remember that God is there.
Yeah. You might be aware of the 10 commandments, but in the Torah there are actually 613 commandments. And lots of do's and don'ts. But if you work out the number of knots and the way that these strings have been tied together, and do a bit of mental math, they come to 613, so that we're remembering not only that God is all around, but also the commandments that God gave to the Jewish people. So for men, that's very important, because for ladies there are only 3.
Excellent, thank you, that's wonderful. And again, more questions. 1F have obviously arrived, they're full of questions, and they're asking, why do you separate meat from dairy? I think you touched on that earlier on.
Yes, it's my favourite thing to say it in a deep, serious voice. So it goes, you shall not see the kid in its mother's milk. 3 times, which means which literally means do not cook a baby goat in goat milk. But so we don't cook goats in goat's milk. But sometimes it's really hard to know what you're cooking and what milk it is and what meat it is. And so just to be on the safe side, we try and ensure that we don't have any meat cooking with any milk at all, which means that you won't have lasagna, for example, because that has meat and cheese in it together.
Unless it's vegan.
Unless it's vegan or vegetarian.
But to the extent that dishes, cutlery, pots and pans are also separate. Colour coding in my kitchen is that anything from the meat side of the kitchen will have a red sticker in the cupboard, or red dish towels. Tea towels are even kept separate as well. And for dairy it's blue. I don't know if you have colour coding as well.
Yeah, remarkably similar.
Yep, absolutely. So,
yeah, we have stickers on our cupboards so people who come in know what they're talking about.
You don't want to mix them up, even to the extent of cutlery and crockery.
Oh, thank you. And Enza would like to know about stories in the Torah.
Oh, the whole...
Well, it's quite a wonderful story.
Can you tell them your favourites? That might be.
Oh, wow.
If you have one.
Gosh. Each story has a very, very valuable lesson to learn from as well. So
I think one of my favourites is Noah. Just because I think, even though it's a story about it's the story of Noah and the flood, and the fact that God chose Noah to be the one who was going to be saved, and when he thought that the world was doing too many nasty things. I sort of like the idea of not necessarily even sort of the messages that we get from it, but I quite like imagining what it must be like to live only with animals and a few people on a boat for that long, and sort of wondering what it might be like to imagine a brand new world at the end of that. What happens next? So I just quite like that story for all the different things that even it doesn't quite say, but all the different ideas that I come up with afterwards.
I like the story of Joseph and his brothers. I'm not from a big family, but I could just imagine what it must have been like to live with, how many brothers did he have? 11, and one sister, so a huge family, and all the troubles that went on with Joseph and his brothers, and how everything worked out in the very end. Lots of adventures going on there in the story of Joseph, so that's one of my favourites.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to combine two questions here. This Kate's class is asking F1. They are asking if you find it annoying having to eat only kosher foods all the time, and what is your favourite kosher food?
Imagine if I said, would you like to eat this hamster? You'd find it a bit strange. I find it really strange thinking about eating pork because I've never done it, and it just feels like a really weird animal to eat because it's so in my sort of brain that it's a funny thing to eat, that it would be the same thing culturally for you as if I said, would you like to eat this hamster? You'd say, no, that's odd. So for me, I don't really mind because I don't think about it. I just find it a really odd thing to think. And my favourite kosher food is my mum's chicken soup. Because lots of Jewish people say that chicken soup is like penicillin. It just makes you better. So if I'm feeling a bit rubbish or a bit ill, my mum will say, have a drink of water, have a nice deep breath, here's some chicken soup. And it makes me feel better.
Yeah, I don't think there's any difference between what you'd call kosher food. As you're talking about, pork is the one thing that's off the menu, and shellfish, crustaceans, and any fish that isn't kosher. But the variety of recipes and food that the Jewish people are eating and allowed to eat is infinitesimal, so we're not losing out on anything at all.
Also, because there are Jews across the whole world,
yeah,
there are Chinese Jews, and they'll have Chinese food that's kosher, and there'll be Australian Jews that have Australian food that's kosher, and there'll be everything like that. So you get the whole variety.
Thank you. Now, I don't know if we have a prop to hand, but they're asking, what does the Torah actually look like?
Yes, if we can, Fran, can we open? Can I?
Yes, of course.
Go for a walk.
I'll show you. The Torah is inside the scroll. I can't take the scroll down to show you, but it's a scroll. It's come over to the microphone. Everything is written, handwritten, on the scroll, and it's the 5 books of Moses which are contained in each of the scrolls that you see behind us there.
You know, like a big old piece of parchment?
Yeah.
It's like that. So you'd have 2 big wooden sticks and then a big piece of parchment that's wrapped really carefully, and it's made by hand, and each person will write out each word very, very carefully, and you then roll it all up and you put it in one of these things like that, and then you put a beautiful cover over it, which is why you can see behind us there are these beautiful white covers.
Yeah. And while the rabbi is reading it on the bima, people can follow exactly what he's reading also in what's called the Chumash, which is the book version of the Bible. And this is written on one side with the Hebrew letters and the English translation on the other, so that we can follow everything that the rabbi is telling us from the Torah. So that's what we have to use in the synagogue and the services.
Thank you. And we've just got time for the last few questions now. Still loads coming in. How long is the Torah?
Well, I think if we unfurled it, we would be going round the synagogue here, And I guess it depends on what size the parchment is as well.
So you can write it really,
'cause
really
you can-
tiny, in
yeah,
which case
and
it wouldn't
you
last
can
very
have
long.
a little mini one, but you can roll it.
It is really, really long. The
Yeah.
idea is that in some synagogues on a festival that's coming up quite soon, you do unravel the whole thing and you hold it very carefully because it's very
Yes,
precious.
yes.
But the idea is that you can take it around an entire community, you can unravel it and the whole community will stand
Stand
inside
inside
it
it.
and it'll have the whole Torah around the whole way around them. It's big.
Thank you. And another question, a good one. Asking, have you ever been bullied because of your faith?
Yes, a few times. Actually, not when I was a child at all. Everyone was really nice. And I think that was because my mum was really good at coming into school and talking about Judaism. Because I think one of the things that why people bully people is because they don't understand. So my mum was really good at coming in and she and my dad would come in and talk about Judaism and we'd have fun activities so people would understand why I was doing something. But when I went to university, I think people didn't have that, and I obviously didn't have my mum with me at university. So people were a bit unfriendly, but I was really pleased that when I tried to explain things, they tended to listen, and the university was really good at trying to help me.
Excellent, thank you. And I think we'll finish on this is a super question to finish up on today. I'm sorry we can't ask all of them, but just going to run out of time, unfortunately. And we would like to ask, what is your favourite part of being Jewish, and are there any bad things? Hard one, I thought we'd finish that one.
I like
Brilliant.
the fact that I'm not from Scotland, but I came up to Scotland and I was really scared because I was 18 and I'd never been here before. And the first thing I did was phone my uncle and I said, do you know the rabbi in the Reformed Synagogue in Glasgow? And he said, yes, of course, I'll get you in touch. And so I came to Glasgow. I didn't know anyone at all, but I came to the synagogue and people said, hello, you must be new. Would you like to come for dinner? Would you like some help? Where are you living? Do you want a lift home? It's really dark. It's really cold here. It's really rainy. We'll give you a lift home. And everyone seemed really friendly. And the fact that I can go to Sweden and I could speak to Jewish people there and they'd tend to be really friendly and look after me. And I like the fact that there's this big worldwide community that I'm part of without ever having to do anything. I'm part of that, and if anyone was Jewish and came to me, I'd try and ensure I looked after them in the same way, as I would admittedly for anyone. If anyone needed help, I'd try and be helpful as much as I could, but particularly with Jewish people when they feel not at home, if they feel in a new place, it's nice to be able to sort of welcome people in, which I really like.
I think that's the whole basis of being a Jewish person, is actually to make sure that you live the kind of life that you would want to be treated by others as you would treat them as well. And I found my favourite thing is to be able to go out and that's what we're doing today, is being able to help other people understand what life as a Jewish person is. I've been privileged to speak in other schools, not just my own school where I was teaching Judaism and stories from the Bible and things like that, but to go out to other schools and talk to children on the Respect Day or Diversity Day, things like that, and just help to spread the word, and that's what I like to do. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you so much.
Okay. Well, I say I had loads and loads of questions prepared, but the questions were so much better than my questions were. I would just like to say a really huge thank you to Margalit and to Zoe and to our director of the camera here, Jen, and to the Scottish Council of Jewish Communities who put this together for us. I hope that you go away from this that you've got a better understanding of Jewish people and Judaism, because that's what we were trying to do. I hope you're aware that you live in a country that's full of different people with different beliefs and different views and different values, but we all share this country together, and that's what we should hold on to. And I hope you've got a real sense there of the Jewish community as being part of the Scottish community, just like everybody else, just like all of us, everybody worthwhile, everybody valuable. And I hope it's made you want to ask some more questions about Jewish people and Judaism as well. And if it has, then obviously you can get in contact with us at Education Scotland. And I mentioned earlier that Zoe is putting together a programme of visitors to go out to schools. And I'm sure you'll agree after today's experience, wouldn't it be great to meet these people in the flesh and to ask again and have that interaction with them. So thank you again. Good luck with your RME and all of your learning that you're doing in school. And thanks for giving up